I've been in the training side most of my career, standing in front of a classroom. We teach the asbestos inspectors and the contractors and the architects and engineers the business of asbestos control, and I have for a very long time. So we coming from that angle, Brent and I work in the practical world, as does Tony, that will be speaking later, and probably some of you as well. What I've come to realize, we've spent so much time with this EPA stuff, we're all overlapping our talks. So what I'm going to try to do is give you some new stuff that I might have in here. What I want to do is talk about legacy. You keep hearing this term legacy material. What does that mean? Well, when we first started going after EPA, and then they kind of focused on chrysotile, and we want to ban chrysotile, that's grand. But how much stuff is still out there? You can't begin to imagine how much stuff is out there. It's enormous, okay? This is one of my colleague Tony's picks. I give you credit there, I want you to know. People steal Tony's. Tony's got probably one of the best asbestos picture pages in the internet called Asbestorama, and they steal his stuff all the time. I try not to. But this is fireproofing, and everybody remember the term friable. You can crumble with hand pressure, right? This is everywhere. I mean, every building that would have been built probably between the 1930s and the 70s when this was banned, which is when they built an awful lot of big buildings in this country. But it's not just in big buildings. It's in factories. It's in paper mills. It's in power plants. Every time a maintenance person opens up a ceiling tile to have to work on wiring or work on plumbing, and when they lift that ceiling tile up, do you think there's asbestos debris that has fallen from building vibration over the years on those ceiling tiles? Some of those ceiling tiles have been there 20 years. So when they drop that down, they're taking a bath. Published data on this stuff. This isn't a presumption, okay? So let's just talk about this to begin with, because this is one of the bad boys of all time. And it still is exposing people, and most people getting above those ceiling tiles are not trained as required in this country. All right, then we have pipe insulation. I just try to throw a couple of quick pictures in here. I could have all kinds of pictures, but this is the kind of thing that Tony and Brent's guys do all the time. You know, we get down in these places, we take samples of these things, we try to figure out whether we got asbestos to the extent. But now, don't think about a little school boiler. This isn't our big issue today. As a matter of fact, a HERA is the least of what we do today. If anybody believes otherwise, you're wrong, okay? It's demolition and renovation work. Okay, we have a rule called NESHAP, asbestos NESHAP, and then the OSHA stuff kicks in after that. Okay, these pipes, again, don't think of school. Think a paper mill. If you've never been in these industrial facilities, every line has something to do with another chemical coming off the process, and they go for miles. I've worked at the Department of Energy sites. These are your old nuclear bomb sites. And we have steam lines that go from high pressure steam, low pressure steam, that will go 30 miles across places. I've worked at the Hanford nuclear facility that's measured in tens of thousands of linear and square feet of material, and they've only begun to even guesstimate of what they have there. Okay? So pipe insulation is another one, and not everything looks like this. There are some companies that keep it up, but other people that work around this stuff every day like this. No training, no protection. All right, asbestos cement, Eternit, Dr. Pagliatti in Italy, know her well. We have plenty of this here, but I'll tell you one thing. You start talking to our friends in Europe, in England, and Eternit littered the continent with this stuff. Actually, I'll give you an example. This is probably the biggest #1 product used in the world today made of asbestos, is asbestos cement sheets. Corrugated rolled tubing used for water lines, all different kind of things, steam lines, wire pulls. And I'll give you something I learned. When you take a look at you're looking at Brazil in the very tight, these gigantic communities of people are in India, and they always look like they're shacks made out of a corrugated metal. No, they're made of this. And some of these areas, the acid rain is so prevalent that this stuff is literally crumbling around them, and we have asbestos victims from just living in these houses because it crumbles over time. We don't have that here, but I'll tell you one thing, anything built after World War II, all the way on up until, God knows, into the 80s. I mean, there are places out west of the United States you can still buy sheets of this stuff, not to build a new building, but as a replacement material. How is that handled? Okay, this is wall board. So imagine drywall wall. A lot of people never see this type of construction, okay? And what they do is they put up the gypsum wall board, and then what they have to do is seal up the seams for a nice smooth finish, okay? See those white stripes? That's drywall joint compound. And it has chrysotile in it. Often, the older it is, the more we tend to find. But it can be at low percentages. This is the #1 thing that building owners will gerrymander to avoid on asbestos liabilities and asbestos work practices is right here. And they will shop these samples to different laboratories until they get the less than 1% designation so they don't have to handle it as asbestos. It's done all the time. Well, if you tell me that's got asbestos in it, it's going to cost this project more. So you're telling me it's okay, you're going to expose your own people to asbestos? You won't keep that client very long, will you? And then just things like floor tiles, vinyl floor tiles, 9x9s, 12x12s. The Europeans have variations on this. We have sheet flooring materials. Super common, folks. This is in almost every building. A lot of times you have floors over floors. We've seen it many times. I want to throw an oddball in here, just to do one odd one. Remember, Tony, this was just up recently on a page, Dan Peters' picture. Where that blue arrow is, if you look at that, what that is asbestos insulation around copper wires in an electrical line. Guys, there's 100 different versions of this. This stuff is everywhere. Any old house, any old office building, any old factory, miles of this stuff. Nobody talks about this much. Every time we post this, I run probably the biggest webpage on asbestos issues that I know of. For the people that actually do the work on LinkedIn. It's called the Asbestos Professionals Network. We got about 17,000 people on there now. And every time we put up this, people are going, they almost want to say when it gets posted, I wish you hadn't shown me that. I wish you hadn't shown me that. Here's the lawyer right there. Yeah, they're glad you showed it to me. Now, but the fact is, folks, there's all kinds of things, and all this does is raise costs. But I want to know how many of the brothers and sisters with the IBEW are pulling this stuff through walls every day. And then those that aren't brothers and sisters of the IBEW. All right, so this is where I wanted to hit legacy costs. What are legacy costs? The worker and public exposures that we still risk and the potential for risk of disease. You know, it would be nice if we never had to have these meetings again. Well, we thought that back in 1984 when the National Asbestos Council first started, if you recall, Brent. Okay, and we thought maybe this would be gone by now, but who were we fooled? All right, the cost of compliance. So, stakeholders. This means people that have to comply with EPA, asbestos, DSHAP, demolition, renovation, the schools, we call that a HERA, and in OSHA we have a general industry, we also have a construction standard. Construction standard applies to when we do removal work. This is enormous cost, folks. And I'm not talking about people trying to get around it. I'm just talking about when they're going to do one of these disturbing projects and to meet those requirements, it's expensive to do it right. Okay? Then agency costs, we have to have these agencies from staff to enforcements. And everybody wonders why don't we see any more enforcement? Why don't we see any of these cases? Well, you know why? Because it takes years to bring them to court. And it doesn't make the press very often. Right, then worker training and protection for employers that actually want to keep up with that. The enormous cost of removal of asbestos building materials. We don't remove just because we need to remove, folks. I hope everybody understands that here. There is no requirement to do that, and there never has been. The only time we have to remove is prior to demolition and renovation work. Okay? Now, some people do it electively, but that's gone behind us now. You don't see so much of that today. Okay, and then the one I skipped, the devaluation of real estate in contaminated properties. That's a big one. Ever widening gap between those that proactively protect and those who will use any advantage possible to get around the asbestos thing. And folks, it's getting wider. We do not have enforcement of regulations, and we have employers that are young enough now that are getting into boss positions that have no sense of why they need to comply with these things. Okay, let me move along. I'm going to just do a few things here. Ban and phase out is brought up a couple of times. They're in the background. I didn't expect you to see it. If anybody needs an explanation of that, the EPA no longer has this on their webpage, but I do, and I'll be glad to send it to you. Their webpage on the ban is miserable today. We did ban things like fireproofing, pipe insulation, ceiling textures, a few paper products. That's about it. Thanks to Linda, and I thank you for that presentation before I forgot how many bills we've put through. But we've done many, and thanks to Linda and the lobbyists that got ahead of us. The one thing we haven't talked about here is this thing that happened when we first tried to get the thing under TSCA, is a thing called a SNUR, Significant New Use Rule. Well, what happened is they kind of shot us in the foot with this one after administrations changed, and they said, well, whatever you got in the market, you can still use it, and if you want something new, well, maybe we'll agree to that too. and you can't read the list, but those are suggested things that they thought we might want to bring back. That's your EPA at that time. And I'll just jump along here, guys, because I'm going to run out of time, but we've already talked about part 1 and part 2, but I want to point out the third last one there, Libby vermiculite. We've got to regulate 2 different minerals called windshite and richterite. There's windshite, richterite, and tremolite. Guys, they're asbestos. The geologists know they're asbestos. They really don't argue about this. There's another side of EPA you don't deal with. It's called CERCLA or Superfund. They now use the term LAA, Libby amphibola asbestos, and it causes cancer. The rest of the EPA doesn't want to admit it, but that's the truth. I think that's probably why they're giving into it. The thing I want to tell you about part 2, and I will stop, I've been nominated to sit on this panel, and I'm sure some others are here. They're doing entirely a literature review, which probably in the science of health is how things are done, but I haven't seen anything that says somebody's going to go out to a work site and take air samples to determine what they're really seeing out there. And they're talking about using our permissible exposure limit is 0.1 fibers per cubic centimeter. And they're now talking about looking at studies between 1.1 and 0.2, if I read that white paper correctly. I don't know what they're going to do here. We'll see. And then this is stuff you guys already heard about. Okay, so the thing is, to have Olin's information today is a very, very helpful thing. I want to thank Linda very much. We owe her a great debt, and to all of you that have been volunteering for this stuff. I know Brent and I have tried to motivate the EIA people and other groups. We want to support the air ban bill. Please do the writing. We had a young man today telling us all to call our Congress people. Write your Congress people and write when we do have a chance for public comments. All right, that's it. Hope that was of value to you. Thank you.